All right. So today I'm going to talk about the future of learning. And so right now we're entering a new era of learning that we like to call the immersive learning era. So a lot of people use this chart, the Gartner hype cycle, which follows the introduction of new technologies into the market and sort of shows how at the beginning people are expecting them to just grow incredibly quickly, but in reality they always kind of have a little bit of a trough and then they rise. So I think for myself and for many people in the industry, we were expecting it to grow much faster than it did, and we overestimated. Fortunately now, after that hike cycle through 2017, through 2018, coming into this year, we've actually really started to see things level out and grow. And so now it's across enterprise, across consumer, we're starting to see applications that are actually really exceeding expectations in some categories. So just to take a step back, to think about how far we've come. This is not even 50 years ago, this is how we organized our offices and our data. Now today, we have mobile, we have computing, we have all of our files with us all the time, but they're still in this flat screen. And in the future, we're going to be living in this world that's mixed, where we can have our information with us and we're not confined to physical space. So we're proposing that XR and AI are actually humanizing the digital interaction. And it's creating this new level for humans to perform at higher levels and have greater levels of cognition. So on the consumer side, I'm going to cover the consumer and the enterprise sides of education. So really incredible use cases like immersive learning, being in an environment to learn a language, or learning chemistry or physics. This is an awesome company, Labster. They build these virtual labs where you can have, basically they call it $1 million lab instantly, and you can deploy it for every student. You've got history, so being able to go back in time and experience what it was like in Rome 2,000 years ago and actually immerse yourself in that space. Of course, a very famous experience, the Apollo 11 experience, you actually go to the moon. You have this whole experience sitting in the rocket, taking a step onto the moon, something that when you think back on it, your brain is actually processing that information as if you had a real experience. It's in the hippocampus, it's spatial experiential memory, which is much different than just reading text or looking at some photos or video. Neuroscience, going deep into the mind and experiencing what things are like at a microscopic level. This is something that people have dreamed of, but now you can actually step inside the mind or inside a cell and see what that's like. This is actually a favorite of mine back from, I think, early 2015, I think is really when this came online. It's called Neos the Universe, and you could go from the scale of an electron, and then it was on Gear VR to start. You would slide and you could go up every scale, up to the entire perceivable universe. So as a human standing there, you could see what it was like to go through basically the smallest layer of existence that we've identified all the way through the greatest, which just creates incredible mind-opening opportunities. Of course, Google Earth, you can travel around the world, you can learn about geography in a way where you're actually standing in a city looking around. With Street View as well, when they introduced that, now you can just stand there and actually look around you at any point in the world where they have that data. Then there's also brain training games. So these have been around for a while. This is a company called Cerebrum. They're actually based out of Russia as well. And they have this game where it's actually improving cognitive performance, focus, memory. And then on the augmented reality side, this is a company called Curoscope. They have shirts where you can basically put on the shirt, you launch the app, and then you can look inside the body and you can actually get a sense, and you move the app around and you can see everything moving, and it's kind of creepy, but at the same time a really amazing way to learn about this stuff. And then of course Sketch AR, one of the most amazing ways to learn how to draw. It gives you a superhuman ability to create in ways that the opportunity is there, but just we haven't had that information layer. So one key aspect of all of this is that there's solitary and social learning. So to show some examples, back about 3 years ago, my company was teaching people how to create VR experiences. So we put about 1,000 students through these programs to teach them how to create VR. And we kept seeing that there was an issue with vector math. So the students, when they were creating programs, that's a very important subject, but people just weren't really grasping the concept. So we actually created a VR experience. Here, let me play it again. It should be on looping mode, but we created this experience where you're able to actually interact with the vector. And people, it was not a formal study, but our students went from taking about an hour of lecture time and about 60% of them understanding vector addition, vector subtraction, to within 20 minutes using this, every single student understood it and they could pass the test. So that, for me, that was like the first step of, wow, this is actually an incredible, incredible tool. Then on the social side, this is a class, I had the opportunity to teach the first in VR class at MIT. This was back about a year and a half ago. And we had students that were in Boston, split between 2 buildings, and then I was in California, in Los Angeles, in a headset, actually conducting the class. And we were able to hand things back and forth. The students were breaking out. It was kind of crazy at the beginning because it was the first time in the first class that people had tried social VR. So the first 45 minutes, everyone was just running around yelling, throwing objects at each other. But once that initial excitement passed, the students reported that it actually was more engaging, they had less distraction, they were able to actually really connect with the instructor, with each other. So switching gears into the corporate side, the corporate enterprise sector of VR has been just really growing explosively, and right now pretty much every Fortune 500 has some sort of VR or AR initiative. And if we look at the actual usage, training is eclipsing everything. And so I'm going to basically go through here and explain how companies right now are saving, in 2019, $13.5 billion by using XR. And that's in 2019. So a lot of people have been talking about in the future, this is all happening, but this past year, 13.5 billion saved, not to mention a lot of other things. So we're calling these the 5 key pillars of corporate XR training. So you have health and safety, you have human resources, you have soft skills, you have operations and compliance, and then you have technical skills. So we're going to go ahead and go through these each here. So this is an example from a company called Striver that was mentioned earlier. They partnered with Verizon to create a simulation of when an armed robber would come into the Verizon store and like hold up the store, what the associates were supposed to do in that situation. And basically they created this film, people come in and it teaches you what to do. Should you jump in front of them? Should you run to the back? And it trains them in that scenario. And they showed that 97% of the people that went through this experience actually felt comfortable and felt prepared to go into these situations, whereas before it was much lower. Then another just incredible use case is hazardous situations and health and safety again. So for example, if you're working at Shell and a truck lights on fire, a lot of people, they try to get trained for that, but if you do that in the real world, that's obviously incredibly expensive because now you have a truck that's on fire and it's dangerous. And so if you use virtual reality, you can simulate that entire experience and you can go through the motions. Of course, you're not feeling the heat and all the adrenaline that you would in the moment, but people report that they really do actually, their heart rate goes up, they really know how to respond in the moment, and it's increasing their ability to respond when an actual emergency happens. So then next, human resources. So one area that's become really popular is harassment training, so basically showing the perspective of someone that's being sort of harassed, and then from the other perspective, how to actually respond to that, how to be a good bystander, how to step in and react. Then bias training. So all of us have our preconditioned biases that we live with, and virtual reality is an amazing tool to actually expose people to those biases and help them overcome them. So one example that I have from just being in social VR, I was in this app called VR Chat, and there was this group of avatars, and I walked in as this tall robot-looking avatar, and I wasn't speaking, so they didn't know my actual identity. And they all greeted me warmly, and they were joking around and having fun. And then I went around the corner and changed into like a small female dark-skinned avatar and came back, and they started just jumping in my face and cussing at me, and like, it was just the most shocking difference just because of how they saw me. So I think that this is the type of thing that virtual reality will really help people understand. So then soft skills. So this is an example that was fairly controversial, but basically you're learning how to fire someone in VR. So this is Barry, and it's an artificial intelligence agent. This is created by an amazing company called Tailspin. And basically you get to practice what you would do. So like you have a brief and you say, all right, Barry, I'm sorry, but this is your last day. And then he responds to you, and then you have multiple options and you actually speak to it. And then Barry either gets angry or sad or like, depending on your response, and it teaches you how to actually have those conversations in a way that's useful. And they're showing great results. The other thing is customer service. So for people that are trying to understand how to interact with customers, create a really solid brand strategy where you know that all of your associates will be acting in the right way toward customers. You can use virtual reality as a super effective tool for this. So operations and compliance. So this is also Striver, which is one of the largest companies in the enterprise training space. They've created this with Walmart, which was kind of like a landmark deal for the industry. It was they have 1 million, it's like 1.2 million employees that they're planning to train with VR, which is just like, that was kind of a stake in the ground for the industry that it's really here with the enterprise. So with this, they're teaching how exactly do you use this new piece of machinery. And I have a statistic at the end, I'll talk about this. This is Scope AR, and Scope is a really interesting company. They have a whole process for creating these sort of overlays. So rather than somebody spending all this time learning about all these things, they just pop a headset on, and then they actually don't even have to do most of the training because it just shows them exactly what to do. So they can do the job and get the training simultaneously, kind of. So. And then technical skills, this is a super exciting category because things like this, you just pop on a headset and now you can see an exact overlay of what you need to do. So it's significantly reducing errors, it's making it a lot safer for people. Again, training time is way, way reduced. So you imagine a company that's at a huge scale, that's billions of dollars. This just looks super fun. I'd love to try this. It's a a crane simulator. So they actually have people that train like this, because imagine having to actually use a real crane and like take the time and take, the person accidentally pulling and it's swinging and hitting the building. Like, this is just one area that is a tremendous use case, and people are starting to see great results. There's a bunch of companies now creating competitive products like this. So just to look at some of these metrics. So Lockheed Martin, which makes aircraft, and among other things, they were using augmented reality, and they saw 85% less time for training. So just if you think about that on a grand scale, that's a tremendous amount of value savings. Then Walmart, 96% reduction in training time. So it went from 8 hours to 15 minutes. They also don't have to send a physical associate anywhere. They just pop the headset on and they can see it exactly, and the people are able to accomplish the goal with great consistency. And then this is one of my favorites, that surgical students trained with VR they have 6 times less errors. So if you have a surgeon that is trained in VR, I personally would want to have my surgeon trained in VR, because that means that's 6 times less likely they're going to make a mistake that could potentially be lethal in some scenarios. So the medical sector is just an incredible, incredible area for this. So again, looking at the 5 key pillars, this is just the foundation, but as we go into the next decade, I think it's safe to say that we'll see all this stuff very quickly become integrated into many of the large companies across all these areas, and probably more, but this is just the start. So again, looking at sort of why VR, way better engagement and retention. There's time savings and lower cost. It's free of physical constraints, so you can create anything. It doesn't have to matter what physics tell you. Rich data and analytics, you're collecting every movement from someone. You can collect eye tracking data, you can collect all this performance data that then gets put into a platform where you can easily see who's performing well, who actually knows the procedures, who doesn't, so it makes it incredibly streamlined. You can create greater equality and reduce bias using avatar systems and using these sort of blind studies, and then, of course, safer learning environments. So that's just the start, and I guess I'll leave you guys with the thought of, if we got from the paper-filled room to now the mobile app to now this, what's next? Think about the next 50 years. Where are we going? And there's a lot of these new developments with people like Elon Musk and now Facebook getting into brain-computer interfacing. And so just thinking about how we go from where we are today to actually bridging this gap is actually going to be faster than we realize, and it's going to continue unlocking more and more potential. So that's all I have. Thank you.